Greetings, Rylan here at the Vic Shop. Welcome to my most ambitious video to date, where I'm going to rebuild the engine and transmission on this cross country. This is going to be something that's going to take me 30 plus man hours to do, so it's going to be a huge video, and I'll try to break it up into chapters. Yeah, I think the time has come to make an entire video because I just can't do them all. There's just so many projects out there and so few people that know how to work on them. So let's begin by talking about the bike, I suppose. This one came all the way up from Florida, probably because he's had a bunch of other people work on it before. Someone did the big bore, and now the big bore's blown up, and then something happened to the transmission, and the drain plug is stripped out on it. It's been around the block, and I want to get it all back to square one again. And this is going to be a good video if you have transmission issues and you're going to rebuild your transmission and you need to know how, or if you have engine issues, because we got to tear the whole engine down to get to the transmission. So this will be a great video for both of those because we're going to be doing both of them, and it's going to get a big bore. We're going to see what happened to the old big bore motor, and we're going to build a new big bore motor for it. So lots and lots and lots of information here. Like I said, I'll try to break it up for you. So what we're going to do is strip this bike down and pull the engine out, which is going to require an overhead hoist of some sort. Back before I had a nice shop, I could do that with like one of those engine cherry picker stands that you can rent from your local store or that your buddy has for pulling engines in and out of his truck, and something to suspend the bike, because what we're going to do is set the engine down on the lift or the floor if you're at home and don't have a lift. And then we're going to pull the bike up and over it and pull the engine out that way. So you're lifting the bike over the engine. So a good strong overhead hoist is going to be a must. And then it's going to require all your typical hand tools, the whole schmear, but it will require some specialty tools. One, if you're building a big bore motor, you're going to need some engine building tools like a deck bridge and a dial indicator, and some other minor things, which we'll talk about, of course. And to get into the cases to do the transmission, it's going to need special Victory tools for the transmission. And I have two sets that I rent out for free. If you're a member of my website, you can borrow them for free. And they're quite popular because there's lots of guys that are trying to do this at home themselves. So I'm going to do this in fast motion. The initial strip down, basically, I'm just going to strip this sucker down, take the tank and bags off and the exhaust, and basically every little tiny thing is going to come off. I'm going to put it all nicely up onto my shelves up above and get to the nitty gritty. So here we go. Let's strip this down so we can pull the engine out. Okay, whew, that was fast. So let me explain kind of what I was doing there. Starting on this side, obviously the wheel came out and the belt. I've unplugged everything back here, including the speed sensor. There's a ground there. These two coming off the engine, they can stay on there. Just kind of tuck them up into here. What's interesting is this got a new pulley on there, and I can see that something nasty was happening because there's like a belt groove worn into the block there. So interesting to see what we'll find. And then I took that map sensor out, got all the wires that were between the cylinders off. Throttle body stays on there. I've forgotten to loosen those clamps. I need to loosen those clamps. That's next. And then we're going to get with the motor mounts. Down here, I've taken off the two lower rails and then removed the battery box, but I've left everything like on it, as you can see. And just kind of set it to the side, and that way we don't have to disconnect anything. It'll just kind of slide back up on there. When we go back together, I took off the voltage regulator and the oil cooler, and I've got, this is how the center of gravity on these engines is right about the center of the cylinders, even though it's got this whole big butt end. And I'm going to finesse the engine up and down to get it out of the frame like this. So I got the oil cooler off, and then I've stripped back all the wires here for the like throttle, the TPS, and I took the coil off and the injectors and all that, and I've kind of moved it all back and over here. Same with the braking system. I have not opened up the braking system in any way. There's no need to bleed this when it's all done. I just took that master cylinder, I unbolted the sensor, the brake light sensor from the battery box, put the whole thing up on the top of the frame there. Same with the rear section. This is an ABS bike, so just got the rear laying up here on the rear part of the frame. What I've done to lift it is I just go off of these two cast-in holes that your backrest would use, and that's super strong if you're using the right grade bolts, and so that's how I've lifted it. Next thing, also to remove the engine, we will need to remove the swing arm. So I'm going to take both the link and the shock bolts out, and then we'll slide the pivot axle out and get the swing arm out of here. Basically, because you can't get at the motor mount bolts to completely remove them with the swing arm in place, so don't try to save yourself a few minutes. I've already tried. Got to take the swing arm off. And then, yeah, let me regroup here and I'll show you the custom motor mounts that we'll use to keep the frames together. So it's got a top frame here and the back frame here, held together all by the rear motor mount. And, well, let me grab the tool and I will show you. Okay, here we are on the other side of the bike, and I'm talking about these motor mounts here. And this is actually the specialty tool that Victory offers for this job. And there's a left and a right. Basically, it's the motor mount minus the part that touches the motor. It'll be the section that joins the two parts of the frame together. And so if you are borrowing tools from me, I'll include a set of these. But if you're doing it yourself at home, you got your own case tools or whatever. What you could do is snag a set of motor mounts from eBay off a salvage bike and just cut this off and throw that out and just use the motor mounts, modified motor mounts in place here. So I'm gonna keep on working and in fast motion here, and we're gonna swap to the modified motor mounts in the rear. I'm gonna be removing the front motor mounts. I'm going to remove the swing arm and let the shock and everything dangle, and then we're gonna lift the frame over the engine. So keep on watching. All right, marvelous. That came out nicely. You saw me take the swing arm off there, swap the motor mounts out. I did make sure to loosen the hose clamps that held the rubber throttle body boot on there. Raised it up with my chain hoist. I was able to modulate the front of the motor up and down to kind of wiggle it out of there. Used a pry bar to pry it away from the back motor mount there. And then I've spun it around here so I can, if you're at home, here's a great time to go put it up on your bench or wherever you're going to do the rebuild. For me, I've got a special motor mount, or excuse me, a motor stand here with a custom mount for the Victory engine that I'm going to bolt up. And so I'll bolt the mount fixture onto there, and then I will lower the engine down enough that I can slide it into the rolling stand. So let me do that real quick, and we'll get this engine off of the bike lift and start tearing into it. You can see this is how I'll just keep it stored here. I got this jack stand. Everything's all tidied up. It can sit like this until the motor is done. Alright, just like that, got the engine out, and I like it on a rolling stand, so it's at, working height that I don't have to bend over. I don't have to lift it onto a bench or anything. It works out pretty nice. So I'm going to wheel it out into the open here and start cracking into it, see what there is to see. I think that's a good stopping point for Chapter 1, removing the engine. And let's get started on Chapter 2, tearing it all down. Okay, actually I've decided to wheel the engine over here next to my workbench so I can take it all apart. I'm going to start with getting the pulley off there. Someone's replaced this, someone's been in here before. This pulley is brand new. I'm curious to see what the Loctite is like behind it. But once that's off, then we can get rid of this wiring that's going to the crank sensor and the gear indicator, and then we'll be ready to tear down completely from there. Start by getting the lock plate off. And get the big guns out. Put what we got here, 1 7/8. Ooh. Well, it's stuck on there. If I had to guess, I'd say someone probably Loctited it. See if we can crack it loose with that. Negative. Well, let's get the pulley puller out. And I just happen to have this special tool for the case work, for splitting the case and putting the case back together. So it'll make a nice impromptu plug for that hole so I can get this puller on here. Yeah, someone didn't want that to come off. Oh yeah, tons of Loctite. Yeah, boy, that's interesting. I got another video where I talk about putting Loctite on here and how to be careful because it'll wick through the threads and splines and get into the bearing that's behind it. So, curious to see what that all looks like. So then the only really scary part, which isn't scary at all, is there's a little tiny plunger and spring behind the neutral, the gear indicator switch, and it won't pop out or anything, but it is a little tiny piece that could get lost, so I just got a little tiny magnet to collect it. So we'll just get these wire holders off of here. Let's put the bolts back where they came from. Oof. A 90-degree pick is a great way to get this sensor out of here. And then let's pull that plunger and spring out. And I like to put them in a little plastic baggie so they don't get lost. Because they're just so small. It's the kind of thing that'll roll underneath your bench and you'll never find it again. And then I've got a couple of boxes here, one for internal engine parts and one for external engine parts, dirty parts or clean parts. And then I can box the thing up, and there's some lag time between disassembly and reassembly that everything's nice and organized. Jeez. He-Man must have put this together. Jeez, it's working the air, the impact. A lot of times they'll throw bolts like that out when they've been massively over-tightened. Surprised it didn't strip the block. unclip its little wire holder here. Alright, now we can just leave this all as one piece. I'm going to put it in the dirty box. Alright. Well, let's dive into the engine. I'm going to start with these injectors. Which can oftentimes be stuck in there, but this motor's been apart recently, so I'm hoping they'll pop right out. But if you end up having to put some work into it, just be careful you don't break the injector. I like to lift off of the kind of underneath where the wires go into the injector is a good strong spot to pop it loose. That one came out without any issue, of course. Putting that in the dirty box as well. And I'll leave these bolts out. We'll just zip the valve covers off. Again, into the dirty parts box. I can hear sand falling out all the little holes where dirt and sand collect. Don't want to mix that in. And then here's another common thing, little pieces of road grime will get in the Allen head bolts. Keep you from removing them. So keep that pick handy. Dump out the sand. Then I flip them face to face so nothing can get inside the valve covers there. Less cleaning to do upon reassembly. Okay. Try to keep everything boxed up because for me, I'm going to take it apart and then it might be a while before I put it back together again. And I don't need parts floating around and getting lost and getting intermingled with other parts. A lot of times I'll put the bolts back where they came from, just to keep track of them. Zap this timing wheel off of here. And if it's got an aftermarket timing wheel, then a lot of times it'll be stuck. This one I'm lucky enough for it to pop right out. Otherwise we'd get that 2-jaw puller back out again and use it. I've got a special engine turning tool, the factory tool, which is on the end of my 1/2-inch drive ratchet here. And this is what I'll use to turn the engine, to take it apart. But if you don't have the special tool, you can just stack up some washers to take the place of the thickness of the timing wheel and screw this bolt back in there and then turn the engine with a 13 millimeter socket. So since this is an internal engine part, we're going to put it in the internal engine parts box, which I like to line with some rags just to give the oil something to soak into. I'm going to start by taking apart the front cylinder. You want the cam to be at top dead center so that it releases the pressure on the springs. But to do that, we're going to have to pull the bottom cam chain bolt out. So I've got it exposed here. Whoops. Zip it out. Man, everything's got Loctite on it. It's not supposed to have Loctite on it. And then we bring it to top dead center. Oh, I'm leaking oil. Just turning the engine was enough to put oil through the oil lines. The oil pressure's working that well. The oil pump, I should say. So even though we're taking it apart and it's going to be a mess, I want to try to control the mess as much as possible. I got a whole bag of rags here at the ready. I'm going to take the chain tensioner off. Put that in here. And then you can take out the guides. One on the bottom. Pop the chain off. And the guides out. The chains and guides are not front and rear specific. They can be interchanged, but I like to keep them so I know which one is which. I just got a way of stacking my parts, I guess, so I remember what came first and what came last. I'm going to move to the rear to get the chain off. The bottom of the cam's already exposed. Bring in top dead center. So we take the tension off the springs. And then the tensioner. And the guides. Oh my gosh. Freaking Hercules back at it again. He's lucky he didn't strip the block out over tightening it like that. It's an excellent way to turn a routine tightening a bolt job into ruining a block. Actually, I'm going to throw that one out. I've get another one out of my spares pile. I don't want to take a chance when it goes back together again. Alright, so now the cams are both at top dead center with no pressure on the springs, so they can be easily taken apart. I like to loosen the cam bolt. Oh, I don't think this one's going to go. If this was a stock engine, these would not be over tightened, and I'd pop the little Allen heads off here. You know, this has got aftermarket cams that we're probably going to stick with, so I'm just going to leave it be. But typically I would take those out, and then there's a magnet that I'd use to pull the cam retaining pin out and get the cam out of there. But I'm going to leave it as an assembly for now. I can see it's got, yeah, it's got some big Lloyd's cams. Remember, this one's got a big bore in it, so it's got aftermarket cams to go with it. So we'll just leave it all together. I'm going to start, there's 6 head bolts. I'm going to start with 2 small ones on the outside. They're 13mm heads. And even though I'm splitting the cases on this, still going to put a rag down in here in case I drop a nut or a bolt or a washer, then it doesn't go down into the crankcase. I would be able to retrieve it anyway, but just good to have it in case this was assembly time. You definitely want it on assembly so nothing gets dropped down in there. Got my little magnet to get the washers off. I loosen in a pattern as well as tighten. Just a good habit to have. And once they're all loose, I'll just save myself the spinning. Don't forget all the little washers. And I can pop that out. And then we're ready to take the head off. It's going to leak everywhere. Just trying to clean as I go, try to keep the mess contained. It's going to be a lot of road debris in here. You want to try to contain as much as possible. Little bits of rocks and dirt. oil. Try to keep all that from getting on the internal engine parts. Before I took this apart, I actually took an air gun and just sprayed it all off, tried to get as much of the dirt and rocks off as possible, especially between the V here. It'll build up stuff, and then you'll pull the cylinder off, and it'll all drop down on top of the crankshaft, and so trying to avoid that. You'll just run a rag through here. So I'm not going to pull this completely off. I'm just going to pull it up so that the piston pin is exposed, and along with the pin, the little keeper will be in there and exposed as well. And I'll leave it all as one piece. Give me a second. Just mopping up the oil as it's dripping out, trying to keep it contained. Keep the mess contained. Then I'm going to use a rag to fill this gap here so that the piston pin retaining ring doesn't go flying down into the engine. Just using a straight pick to pick it out of there. Then I'm going to push the pin. I always remove this side, the pin from this side. There's less head bolts to deal with. And it's jammed in there good. See if my 13mm can push it out by hand. What's probably happened is the last guy has marred up the pinhole trying to get the pin in. It's going to take some taps. Should slide right out if the motor is unmodified. Okay. I'm just dumping out some oil and little bits of rocks and stuff I can hear in there. So the nice thing about this is it's all contained. If this was brand new engine that we were going through for some weird reason, you could just like leave the piston in there and then put it all back together. I'm going to remove it eventually, but I could see already this aftermarket engine has been rusty, and the pistons are nasty looking, so is the bore. I'm going to end up redoing all this, popping that piston out of there. But for now, I'm setting it aside. And we'll move on to the rear. Second verse, same as the first. washers off this way. All right. I know there's going to be a mess of oil back here, so I'm just going to put my rag there preemptively. Ooh. Just taking note of the overall condition as I'm pulling it apart. I notice there's a bunch of rust on the front cylinder. Showing up on the exhaust valve. Try to catch this oil before it gets away from me. You'll thank yourself when you go to clean it up, put it back together. Probably go through a whole bag of rags just on one engine, trying to keep it all contained. So the last thing you want is to have to do this again because something was dirty and now it's leaking. This is going to be a big project and want to do it right the first time. Okay, let's get that retaining pin out of there. It's at an awkward angle. Is. Shouldn't be more than light taps. Should not be rapping on it hard with your hammer. There it is. Put this somewhere where it can make a mess. Alright, just like that, the engine's torn down. Just going to do a little cleaning here. Try to keep that mess contained. All right, looking good. Easy enough. All right, what do we want to do next? Let's flip it around and do the primary side. Technically, you don't need to pull the primary to split the cases. We're going to need to, definitely, because there's going to be some transmission stuff going on, and there's a retainer bolt in there. And I just want to see what the last guy screwed up and make sure that everything's all good in there. I have a big tray here to contain the oil, but missed the tray. I'm going to set this in the parts washer so it can drain down, drip down. Oh, come on, there you go. Huh. Wow, that guy was running a big bore engine with a stock clutch. That's amazing. So I will take this clutch apart and rebuild it because I imagine it's pretty nasty inside, trying to push around a big bore cross country. But I am just going to take it off as a full assembly right now. .32 millimeters on the big gun. The nut is a stake nut and should be replaced every time. I actually do replace it every time. I got a whole stock of these upstairs. So I'm going to toss that out. Set that in the clean parts for now, but then I can get at this retaining nut for the transmission on the backside. I'm going to leave this stuff for now. I have no reason to take it off. The torque compensator and the crankshaft and flywheel and everything, we're going to leave all that alone for now. I'm going to spin this back around, and then, whoops, what we're going to do is put a pan under there and drain the oil. And then I'm going to go into, we'll get a little closer look at the specialty tools and getting this case half split apart.